Hello, and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. Today, I am privileged to be joined by Angelina, a recurring guest who's going to be talking about some fun projects she's working on today. And I, as always, am Kody Kinzie, a security researcher at Varonis. Today, we are going to take your ethical hacking Q&A questions while talking about probably some cool aerospace stuff and also about some low-cost electronics that you can get off AliExpress for less than $5 that can do some pretty interesting and cool things. So, Angelina, thank you for joining us again today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on the show again, Kody.
So people may be noticing that we are running on Pacific time today, but unfortunately that does not mean that I'm still in Los Angeles. Instead, we have a guest in Pacific time over. So thank you to everybody for hanging out with us a little bit later than usual. But honestly, I find that these late streams are kind of cool. Like people maybe are like getting off a little, like in some time zones or something. I don't know, but like we have more people chime in and I think it's more active. So I might stick to it. Honestly, I kind of like it. But today, I'm going to continue on talking about some of the cool things that I have managed to pick up for a low amount of dollars on services like AliExpress. You can find them on Amazon, but really what I'm trying to show is that hackers nowadays have a huge array of options for all the kind of like magical powers they may choose to exhibit in order to perform a certain attack. So all this kind of relates back to cybersecurity, but I really do like the kind of like the maker sphere of things where every new sensor is a new possibility and you can think about all the wonderful things you can create. Whereas I also then immediately turn around and think about all the terrible things you can create. So this is kind of a continuation of all the things you can make for less than like $10 or so. So this latest one I've got is an HW147 carrier board. And this is for like an NRF chip. I'm gonna have to look up the actual one and show you guys later in the stream. But this is a little like NFC reader and writer that's capable of reading, writing, and potentially cracking different like MyFair cards and other sorts of cards that are used to get into hotel rooms or things like that. So these little readers, they have a built-in antenna around the side. I used to think that they would be minimum like $50 to get into the game of potentially spoofing like a key card, an authentication key, or like a Metro Transit Pass or something like that. But it seems as though these chips have gotten down to the point that you can get them for practically nothing. So I'm going to be testing this one out this week. It's probably the one I'm most excited about because of all the things that are embedded in the Flipper Zero. I think its ability to read, write, and potentially crack some of these cards is really what is, in my opinion, the most impressive, aside from the radio module. I'll give you that. That one's really cool too. So seeing that ability broken out into a sub $5 board where anybody can do at least one of the major things that the Flipper does, I'm pretty excited about that. So this little square is potentially capable of doing a lot of bad things. So I'm going to talk about this probably later next week, but I just wanted to shout this out as one of the things I was looking at. I also was interested, and Angelina, have you ever worked with one of these e-ink displays?
Yeah, I've seen the TFT displays before, not specifically e-ink, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I start to see these everywhere. And in particular, I see them in stores like Best Buy where they have prices attached to them. So me being a hacker, I'm like, okay, if one of these things can be easily rewritten, then does that mean that the price is really the price? Like if their little thing says one thing, like is that what people are going to honor? Is it going to be a mistake in favor of the customer? Yeah, I don't know. So I was just interested in retail hacking, or for anyone that works with e-ink displays, I was like, oh, this is a cool technology until I learned about the refresh rate. Angelina, have you ever heard how often you can write to these little e-ink screens before you potentially cause problems?
Not sure. I'm guessing it's pretty slow.
Yeah, it's pretty slow. Okay, wager a guess. How often can you write to this screen without damaging it?
I don't know, like 30 times a second.
It's so much worse. 3 minutes. Once every 3
No way.
minutes. Yeah, for
No
real.
way.
Yeah, so I didn't believe it. But these things are pretty cool because they have red, green, and black. And for any hackers that are looking at, how to manipulate them, how to change them, it's pretty interesting to note that the reason why you're starting to see these pop up oh my gosh, I keep punching the microphone. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm gonna move that away from me. I'm used to it like being over me, so there's never been an object here before for me to avoid. But the whole reason you're seeing these appear all over the place is because they're very low cost, they're really easy to use, but they can't be refreshed very often. So they're ideal for things like price tags or things that might only be updated once a day or something like that. All right, so the last one I got that I think is applicable to the hacker community is this little guy. So this is a LTE SIM module, and it actually cost, I think, $3 when I bought it. that's pretty remarkable because these used to, back when I wanted to connect a Raspberry Pi to the internet, these were like a $30, $40 investment. And now all of a sudden we're able to get them for less than 10 bucks. So this SIM module means that I could, for example, connect it to a Nugget and then control it from basically anywhere, or be able to push commands, get sensor information, get information about like presence detection. There's all sorts of things I could do once I throw in an LTE connection. So this little LTE module, I was impressed by how low cost I could get it. So last week I talked about radar presence sensors and a couple other cool and interesting things you could get for very cheap. This week, just want to throw these ones out there as the ones I'm going to be testing and checking out. And also the Raspberry Pi Pico has gotten a lot of people interested because it's the actual price that like the Raspberry Pi Zero W I think was supposed to be, or I guess just the Raspberry Pi Zero was supposed to be like $5. And of course it never is. But the Pi Pico does actually tend to be that. And it's useful for human interface device projects, but I haven't seen very many good ones. So I started looking around on Kinzie, and this was the first one I found. And I think I'm going to customize it for a couple reasons, but it's basically a bunch of keycaps with a Raspberry Pi Pico, and you can create your own macro pad like this. So if you were some sort of, I don't know, video game cheater, you could record a bunch of macros here and be able to like mash buttons and like do stuff if you wanted. Now these keycaps, they kind of like come loose and go into different directions. I'm not sure I like them too much, so I might remix this, but I really like how creating your own keyboard can be used for all sorts of like nefarious like hacker purposes, or it can be for just customizing your environment. And it's also a way you can use some of these low cost, cool electronics. So everybody knows I am a big fan of these like low cost devices, and I love how you can just kind of combine them like Legos to make your own prototypes. I think honestly, I'm going to be trying to do a class like maybe around like Black Hat or something for like creating pen testing prototypes with the microcontrollers. So anybody who wants to understand like how are hacking tools, like Hack5 tools made. Some of them, or like some of the functionality of some of these like popular tools can be basically prototyped for specific scenarios, like not like really networking stuff too much, but a lot of the other like hardware based things you actually can do. So anyway, a field where there's been a lot of interest, and I wanted to shout out some new things that you can kind of throw in your tool bucket if you're looking at making red teaming or pen testing prototypes. This one of particular interest.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially for beginners who want to get into the field. Rather than just getting like a really robust hacking tool, they could just revert to a cheap sensor module and then try out various little hacking projects without it being too overwhelming. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good example code for most of these things. So if you wanted to add one ability and then kind of add a second ability specific to whatever thing you happen to be making, a lot of people have, passion projects with this sort of thing, or they're doing very specific research. So being able to add one or another is kind of cool. I like to know what's out there, and I like to know what kinds of things are actually possible when it comes to hardware. If I'm getting a suspicious package, it's nice to know that it maybe for $2 that package could be like reading any keys I have in my pocket, or like potentially trying to like steal my, I don't know, my credit card information or something like that. All right, so Angelina, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the satellite resources you have been accruing? Because I've been seeing you on LinkedIn very, very effectively, I might add, talking about some satellite projects that have been getting a lot of attention. So I'm happy to have you on the show, if only to explain what all the hubbub is about, because I think I've seen more LinkedIn notifications on that than any other content this week.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so this is going to be an upcoming video for Redia, but one project I have been working on this week is a beginner guide on how to track the International Space Station using basic radio equipment. So what I did was I used just a directional Yagi antenna. This is tuned to UHF, so it's 400 to 470 megahertz, and a UV5R handheld radio. And using this equipment, you can intercept communications from the International Space Station as it orbits above you. It's a little bit tricky since the ISS is orbiting around every 90 minutes, so you got to get the timing just right. But I just guide you through the process of doing so. It's not too terrible, but there's not a lot of effective online guides that really guide you through the process. So I'm really excited to be working on that this week.
That's really cool. So for anybody that hasn't seen like a Yagi antenna before, can you explain like what that crazy looking thing is?
Yeah, so it's essentially just an antenna. However, satellite communications, satellites are all the way up in space. So whenever they're sending signals back down to Earth, it gets attenuated, meaning that the signal depreciates over time because you have obstructions in the atmosphere, you have all sorts of things that are degrading the signal. So the downlink signal of the ISS is pretty strong because the thing called the transceiver on the ISS, which is responsible for sending down communications, sends pretty powerful signals. So you could effectively use like a small rubber ducky antenna to receive those signals. However, if you want a more strong, more coherent signal, want to be able to hear things more audibly, you can use something like Yagi here, which it's set up in such a way where it just radiates signals in a very directional way. So you can receive really clear transmissions from the ISS.
So what do you actually hear like on these transmissions? Like, does it need to be like decoded with a computer, or can you actually hear like like what do you actually hear?
Yeah. So there's all sorts of broadcasts. Sometimes you can hear astronauts talking with one another. Another time they send down just random telemetry. Sometimes they have educational outreach programs. It really depends on what time you're intercepting it.
So is this then like something that they're deliberately broadcasting in the hopes that people are intercepting it, like with projects like this?
Yes, yeah. It's been a ham radio community project for a very long time. So anyone who's interested in amateur radio or wanting to like intercept the signal can do so.
Oh, cool. So James says that he downloaded some photos directly from ISS a couple years back. So I guess it's not just voice also, like you said, some telemetry, but it also seemed like maybe they're streaming some data as well that you could potentially pick up.
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay. I'm going to be honest. I had no idea that like the ISS had a deliberate attempt to be, broadcasting like programs of interest, like a little like, FM radio station, or is it FM radio?
Yeah, it's FM. So you have to tune in to the specific frequency. I think it's like 145.8 megahertz.
Cool. So, all right, then. So using a highly directional antenna, then if you're able to lock in on its physical proximity and kind of track it, then you should be able to listen in. So are you just using like your arm and just kind of holding it and like tracking it manually?
Yes, because of Doppler. Yeah, so there's two ways you can do it. You can manually like change the rotation of your arm as it passes over you. There's also another like effect called the Doppler effect that makes things a little bit more nuanced because signals as they propagate through the atmosphere will shift over time. So if you want to be more deliberate about it, you could program like specific like frequency shifts into your radio in order to make the signal more coherent. But it's not necessary. You can just like rotate your arm.
That's pretty cool. So, all right. So I saw also that you had some resources for people who are looking to do this about like how to actually find this. Because I mean, I guess you could just go out there and just start rotating your arm and like eventually you'll probably get the ISS, but like there's probably a better way, obviously.
Yeah. So I would say I would refer you to 2 points of entry in order to get that information. I posted like a series of tweets on Twitter explaining the process. I also included a pretty thorough LinkedIn post. So if you follow me on Twitter or you follow me on LinkedIn, the guides are attached there. I'm also going to be releasing a video on the Redia channel. So you'll probably see that come up on my feed as well.
Cool. So was there anything you wanted to show off related to this?
Yeah, so something in relation to, I guess, aerospace. I have a special class coming out I think next week or within a few weeks. So everyone on the stream has probably heard of Python. Python is a very pervasive programming language. It's popular because the syntax is super simple, meaning that a lot of technical people like engineers or scientists that aren't specifically programmers can get into it. And when I first got into Python, I noticed that there was a lot of like basic Python tutorials, but not specifically for space applications. And I think this course will be a cool nexus where you can learn both about space concepts alongside Python in tandem in a very beginner-friendly and interactive fashion.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think Python is a great entry point for most beginners because it's one of the first languages that beginners can really be proficient in or, make their own prototypes or just understand the way things work. So
Yeah.
making that accessible to people with a little bit of a background in Python, or just, you know, like, I think that most people get that in school nowadays, which is super cool. So that's really exciting. How would someone sign up for this class?
Yeah, so if you want to sign up for the class, you can visit the website here, pythonforaerospace.com. The course doesn't launch until a few weeks from now, but in order to get an update when the course is launched, you can enter your email address and you can sign up for the course.
So I'd also like to point out that even if someone isn't necessarily just interested in, you know, listening in on the ISS or something, like for your last point anyway, that like that's kind of like a fundamental skill for any sort of satellite tracking or hacking that you've covered in the past. So being able to identify a satellite, where it's going to be, and then like actually be
Right.
able to establish like an uplink or a downlink, like that's kind of a fundamental skill. So if anybody, you know, is wondering like, oh, like, you know, like, how does listening in on a single like station from the ISS like relate back to cybersecurity? It's like, well, like you're gonna have to go through that process of identifying the satellite and like tracking it, like no matter what you're doing in space. So I was just like reflecting on that. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool, because it's like the gateway to basically trying to communicate with any satellite.
Exactly.
Is like figuring out the frequency, figuring out where it's going to be, and then like, you know, either aiming your arm or like making something that's able to like track.
Yeah, the thing about aerospace cybersecurity is it's a very highly multidisciplinary field. So I think this course could be a really good gateway in order to get some of the conceptual knowledge required for understanding the basics of like satellite security. Because if you want to intercept a satellite, you got to understand its position within orbit. You have to understand a concept called TLEs, which include aerospace values in there, and like orbital mechanics, alongside various other aerospace concepts that are infused within the field. So if you're interested in the cyber side of aerospace or the development side of aerospace, I think this course can tailor for both.
Cool. All right. Well, I have a story that I was gonna save for Friday, but I think that you are the perfect expert to weigh in on it. And frankly, I consider this to be like within our team, because the writer of this Hackaday story is none other than our own Arya. So I just wanted to bring up the story, and I know that you talked about potentially even doing like a video on it later on. But could we talk about this crazy spoofing of drone signatures with an ESP?
Yes.
Like, how is this possible? What is like? What can you basically just like walk us through like what this article is talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. So a lot of drone brands adhere to this protocol called Drone ID, and it's kind of like a tagging system for drones where people could track basic telemetry of drones, where they're oriented within flight, their GPS coordinates, flight speed, and other indicators of where it's located using a system. And it's kind of like ADS-B for airplanes, where in ADS-B you can keep track of all the planes in the sky, where they're located, what type and model the aircraft is. But in this case, for drones, however, a lot of aerospace identification protocols are pretty inherently insecure. Similar to ADS-B, Drone ID is the same thing, where the communications over Drone ID are not encrypted, making it possible to use a very low-cost microcontroller like the ESP32 or the ESP8266 in order to broadcast and spoof packets, making it seem like there's a drone that really isn't present, which is what drone spoofing is.
That's so cool. So what protocol does this actually use? Do you know, like, in order to identify itself as a drone?
I'm not too sure about the drone ID specific protocol. I think it might be specific. I know it's pretty universal, but DJI might have a specific version of it.
This is so cool. Yeah, so this tells me that, so we can make a couple deductions here. One of them is if it's running on an ESP8266, then it must be 2.4 gigahertz. And the second deduction would be like, if it is running on 2.4 gigahertz and this guy is saying that he's standing on the shoulders of Spacehoon developed an ability for the ESP8266 that allows you to send arbitrary Wi-Fi packets. So that tells me that Drone ID is very, very likely using 2.4 gigahertz and something that is either like a custom packet that like this is able to send, or some other sort of like Wi-Fi aligned or slightly modified Wi-Fi spec. The nice thing about what Space Hoon did with this particular microcontroller is basically make an alternative firmware for it that allows you to send these arbitrary packets and make that kind of an easy template for other developers to use. So it seems as though the ability to send arbitrary packets here is allowing this developer to create a template for like remote ID for drones and then spoof that relentlessly the same way that some of these like other attacks involving spoofing work, like a deauthentication attack or a beacon swarm attack where you're creating like hundreds of fake networks via fake Wi-Fi beacons. So the thought that you could use the same fundamental principle, like a blank template for sending Wi-Fi packets, to instead of creating fake networks, create fake drones, is truly amusing to me. Because that means, for one, like I'm pretty sure that this is going to be possible to like port over to other platforms. And as an operator of a fleet of nuggets, I would be excited to see if I could create like an airborne version of the nugget that does this sort of thing. That's basically like a nugget cloaker that like cloaks the actual airborne drone in a fleet of noise to create confusion as to where it actually is. Angelina, are there any laws that this would be violating that you know of as a pilot?
Yeah, definitely. I know
Sorry,
ATC.
James just commented, I
Yeah.
suspect this could shut down an airport. Yes.
Yeah, so one thing, ATC, air traffic controllers, who are the moderators of airports and like keep track of all the pilots and tell them what to do, they also keep track of UAV traffic nearby the airport. And usually like when you're listening in on them, they put it as a NOTAM, so like notice to airmen, where there's like UAV activity. So yeah, if a person were to execute an attack like this, I'm actually quite concerned because I was thinking of doing a demonstration of this, but I live right next to an airport, so it might cause a little bit of chaos because yes, ATC does monitor for UAV activity and it can interfere with pilot activities.
Just out of curiosity, do you know how a regular person would view drones in their area that are putting out the signal? Because I believe it's possible to do this, right?
Yeah, so there's I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure they do use drone ID, but there's a multitude of mobile applications. I have
Oh,
an app on my phone that like lets you track down like nearby drones.
yeah, I just found it. Sorry. It was like literally in the README. I was just scrolling past it. Open Drone ID, which is
Yeah.
available in the App Store or the Play Store. You have to disable scan throttling for your device and run the device for 5 to 10 minutes before all the drones are in the air. Okay, cool. So, man, that's really, really interesting. Like being able to identify a bunch of fake drones from your own device and see what, air traffic control would see. My concern is that somebody is going to port this and run it on a flipper or like run it on something else with an ESP attached, and you're going to see them like run it by accident, and it's going to cause an airport incident because we don't have a way of distinguishing this. And I think it's like kind of a dumb standard that like these can't be verified or authenticated in some way, even with a connected, like not being able to verify these things like in an offline situation, that's one thing. But if you're like air traffic control and you're fully connected to the internet and you have access to like a database that's able to verify these based on a hash they're displaying or something, that would be at least a step towards detecting these spoofing attacks. But as far as I know, there doesn't seem to be any sort of mitigation against this. So yeah, as this came out, we kind of had like a little team meeting and we were like, oh my God, like first of all, we need to cover this. And I, living in the frozen north off in the middle of nowhere, there's so many places I can go to test this that nobody would know or are also flying drones or like, other things. It would be no big deal. But in a city with a lot of air traffic, or like, let's say that there's like a crime scene where, like a helicopter's flying overhead and all of a sudden people start spoofing thousands of drones nearby. Like this, that could cause the helicopter to leave, like it's basically electronic countermeasures for aircraft because it creates safety concerns that, per the rules of aviation, whatnot, like you really cannot ignore, even if they are being spoofed. Like you need to be 100% sure before you ignore them because it could cause an accident. So I think of all the things and all the points of discussion, like this aerospace threat was probably the craziest that I saw this week. And I'm glad that you're here to weigh in on it because I think, like I said, we're going to try looking at this and seeing how it works and get a feel for like how effective it is. But we also need to be very careful doing this research because fortunately, Angelina is a pilot and is aware of the dangers of doing this next to an airport. But I think that a lot of people who now have access to this have no idea like how serious this could be or how difficult it would be for an airport to distinguish between a legitimate threat and then somebody just goofing around with this or forgetting to turn it off. All right, here's a question. Are you guys going to DEF CON? Yeah, as far as I know, we are going to DEF CON. We're currently hanging out with the IoT Hackin' Village, and I think that we're actually going to try to maybe even do a vendor table this year. I'm not sure yet. We might see. If we did a vendor table, then you can expect to see like a whole nugget table, which would be really exciting. But we actually are doing a nugget table at Scale, which is happening next week. So Scale is Southern California Linux Expo, and it's one of my favorite conferences. It's in part because, you know, it's in Pasadena and I went to school at Pasadena City College. So it was very easy for me to go to. And a lot of my like favorite Linux and security nerds around Los Angeles and Pasadena always go here. So it's going to be really cool to actually be a sponsor at Scale. We're going to have a table popped up for people to come hang out and meet, and we'll have a lot of really cool things there. So if you're going to be at Scale or if you're in Southern California, please come by and say hello to us. Scale's an awesome conference. It's great to support the open source and Linux community. And yeah, we just generally love it there. And also the weather is really nice. So I'm certainly not going to object to getting out of the snow for a week to hang out at Scale. So hopefully we'll be able to bring out the whole team and you'll be able to meet some more of our content creators. Maybe even Angelina might stop by. You never know. But yeah, so it would be really cool to see some of you guys there because it is, as I said, one of my favorite conferences and it's going to be a great time. So check us out at Scale. You're going to meet a lot of people from our show, and also we'll have some cool nugget related things to show off and announce. So I think this is the first time that Security Forward has been a sponsor of a conference, but the people at Scale were really super nice, and we're excited to work with them to do some great things at the conference. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Oh, cool. So Need a Better Name is coming to DEF CON all the way from Australia. Well, if you haven't been to DEF CON before, Angelina, last time was your first time at DEF CON, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
All right. So what would you tell someone who is putting it all on the line and flying all the way from Australia to go to DEF CON, presuming it's their first time?
Yeah. So I would say one thing I didn't do last year, which I think was a mistake, was making like a schedule of all the workshops and talks I want to go to, because although like there's so many villages at DEF CON, so it can get super overwhelming, especially with all the people there. So I would recommend you like have a thorough schedule of all the talks you want to go to, depending on like your priorities and what you want to learn, because it can get pretty overwhelming at the conference. You don't want to be making impulsive decisions at the moment. So just like have an outline of like what you're going to be doing there, and a general like list of villages, and making sure like you can navigate through the villages effectively, so you're not like all over the place, so you can get the most out of the conference. That's what I would say.
Getting the most out of DEF CON is pretty difficult. And if I was going to sum up DEF CON in one word, overwhelming would probably be that word. I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It's overwhelmingly good, but it's also just overwhelming. So if you're somebody who's there for the first time, it's really I would concede it's impossible to experience all of DEF CON in one sitting. Like you can go deep on any particular community or any particular village and spend your entire time like, you know, becoming embedded in like what they do, or you can go all over the place and try to experience a little bit of everything. Last time you got to be a vendor, which is its own unique, crazy experience. And you got to talk to like probably hundreds of people that were like, like coming up and asking you questions and like, you know, like getting to express their passions and curiosities, and like, it's just really crazy because everybody has their own unique experience. Like Angelina got to be a vendor, so like being the focus of all these people's attention is like weird because most people kind of blend into the crowd. And it's like, oh, is somebody going to notice me? Is somebody going to hack me? But for some of us, it's just like a fire hose of attention just getting directed right at us, and we just have to like take a breath and like do what we can to like meet each person and like try to like, you know, learn what we can and experience what we can while also adding to other people's experience. I got to be a goon last year, which was really cool. A goon is one of the staff members at DEF CON, and my particular role was I got to help out with doing press tours. So that means walking the press around and introducing them to all the villages, making sure they understand the rules, and also making contacts. So like, let's say they're doing a story on, car hacking. Well, we would introduce them to the leaders of the village and basically give them the context they need to ask appropriate questions and know who's correct to interview. So DEF CON was really cool for me. I never got to be staff before. I have a cool Goon shirt, but it was right around that time that like Goon kind of took on like a different meaning. So like at that point, like I kind of put that hat up for a little bit, but I'm excited to go back to DEF CON and like hang out, do some cool, probably vendor stuff this year, and also do a lot of workshops like the ones we did at the C3 conference. So I guess my advice for anyone going to DEF CON the first time is don't worry too much about missing talks because they're recorded, unless they're Sky Talks or any of the talks that are like not recorded. Those are the ones worth checking out. I would say like any like really well-planned shenanigans you can get involved in, like the people that really put their all into creating games, CTFs, and other conference-specific experiences, those are really the things that like cause you to make friends and it like unlock like parts of the conference that you wouldn't just kind of attending and poking your nose around. So I personally love getting involved in conferences. I hate just being a spectator, so I'm always trying to like get involved somehow, like I try to figure out how it works. So I would say like if you can find good groups of people that are working on well-organized projects and get involved in their thing that doesn't happen anywhere outside the conference, a lot of the time, unless you want to talk to the exhibitor, a lot of the talks at the conference can wait, unless they're not recorded, in which case, do check them out. So that's my advice for DEF CON. It's just too big to experience in one sitting. There's just too much stuff. All the sub-communities, all the presentations, the tools that come out every year. They have like their Black Hat has Black Hat Arsenal, and I think like DEF CON has like demos or something where like they show off like all the cool software and hardware tools that people created that year. It's like you could just get lost in any one of these things. So don't be afraid to have your own personal experience at DEF CON and realize that if you feel like you're missing out because there's too much stuff, it's by design almost at this point. There's just too many things for everybody to have the same experience at DEF CON, and that's kind of the beauty of the conference. Let's see. The venue changed. Yeah. So last year, me and Angelina had our like second night of DEF CON ruined by a bomb threat. So that caused the closure of a lot of important institutions, like precious GothCon was canceled. So that sort of disruption, I don't know if that maybe contributed to the decision of Caesars to not go forward with hosting DEF CON this year, but DEF CON was in fact briefly canceled. So it seems like they managed to get the Las Vegas Convention Center, and now we have a new venue that we're going to. So, I'm not too concerned because the Las Vegas Convention Center, I believe, is the same conference center that Black Hat is hosted at. And Black Hat is absolutely huge. It's like almost overwhelmingly huge. So there's going to be tons of space. The format's just going to be really different. So all these last minute changes, I'm interested to see like what they can pull off. Frequently, like DEF CON is plagued with like, like the badge didn't work or like something messed up where like we'll just have paper badges or like, like plastic badges or something every couple of years because just something goes wrong. So as people who made our own badge last year, I completely understand that this happens. And with the added disruption of the venue being changed at the last second, I can only imagine what might go wrong with like the badges and stuff like that. So I don't want to jinx them, but yeah. Leah says it's going to be everyone's first time at the new space, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Fingers crossed that it's going to be awesome. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of cool that like for beginners, like people that have been there forever, this is going to be a completely new experience in a new space. So I like that. I think that it puts everybody on a level playing field. A lot of the institutions, will endure, but the actual physical space is going to radically change. And that's going to be a cool experience, I think, for everyone. We'll also have to see how like some of the other underlying things that the casinos were more weird about, like food and other stuff, like will change. I don't know if anybody has worked at DEF CON except for us, but getting food to your team, almost impossible. Like you have to like
that was a logistical nightmare last time. Yeah,
it made the experience like honestly horrible. So like if you've been at DEF CON, like you're not allowed to bring in outside food and they're really strict about it, and that means that like just getting cheap food delivered or something to your team is like really hard. So if you're just at the conference, one of the worst things was like the food issue. So I'm at least looking forward to the possibility of like food being less of an issue, and then some of these other like nitpicky things that the casinos were really weird about maybe being less of a concern. Let's see. Good to see Angelina. Amazing. Yeah, no, it is amazing. It's always amazing. Black Hat's at Mandalay Bay. Yeah, but isn't Mandalay Bay and the Convention Center like next to each other or connected? Like, I don't remember, but I do remember that it's at Mandalay Bay. I get the feeling that this year I'm just going to be staying at the Mandalay Bay a lot, so I should probably book that room soon. But yeah, so it's going to be cool to be away, I guess, from the rest of the strip in some ways, because While I really enjoy how hackers just take over the whole casino area and stuff, and like it's a complete washout of like every other like group of people. Okay, so the one thing I will miss though is there is a Subway franchise owners convention immediately before DEF CON every year. And I always get into like Las Vegas, like, you know, the day before DEF CON. And like there's all these like rowdy people with like eating Subway cookies, like walking around the conference center. And I'm just like, man, these people have a lot of energy. And I was just like, what do these people all have in common? Like they're just like really like type A people. Like, and then like, oh, they're all owners of like various Subways in cities across the United States. So I've actually come to like enjoy, like I've hung out with the Subway franchise owners a couple times because they're just like rambunctious people. So I will truly miss this year being separated from the Subway franchise owners. It was nice while it lasted. So unfortunately, one of my traditions will be broken by this change to the DEF CON venue. And that's, I guess, like partying with the franchise owners the day before DEF CON. So if you're a Subway franchise owner, especially from Florida, as most of them seem to be, then I will miss you this year, I guess. The trick with the new venues is to have low expectations, and that way you'll end up being impressed, or it'll just be okay. So hopefully it's a win-win. Yeah, so like I'm just gonna assume that hopefully everything is just not worse than DEF CON. And if it ends up being better, then you know that's a wonderful surprise. So I'm also curious if anybody else in the chat is going to be going to DEF CON. I think we're going to be doing Black Hat and DEF CON this year. We're also going to be doing Hope in New York. We've got Scale coming up, and we're eyeballing some other cool conferences. One of the ones that we haven't been to before, but we're looking at is Tour Camp, which would be really cool. So, Angelina, have you heard of Tour Camp?
I've heard of it, but I've never went.
Yeah, I really want to. Any excuse to be in the San Juan Islands, especially doing like hacker stuff, is like an automatic yes for me. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff out there that we're considering going to this year. I think the biggest leap is like I'm still deciding whether or not I want to try to go to some of these European conferences I've been invited to. Like EMF Camp is another example of one that I would love to go to in the Netherlands that a lot of my friends are going to, but you know, it's kind of a commitment to fly to the Netherlands. I got to change out a bunch of gyros. I got to, you know, like make all my travel plans ahead of time. But I would like to check it out. And if I can get sponsored for it, then I definitely will be doing it.
Yeah, and Kody, you had a blast at the last conference in Europe you went to. So
it was so fun. The only reason I had a blast, though, was because I was able to bring so many of our friends and we were able to keep so many people. So going to a conference I'd only been to once before and meeting like automatically like almost 200 people and then walking around exhausted and running into all my friends I made like throughout the conference was so cool. I really felt like I could go anywhere and meet someone that I had like taught. And the year before I had like taught the creator of Octoprint like during a Wi-Fi class, and I was like kind of starstruck. So like I get to meet the coolest people when I do get out there. But you know, it's all about having friends around you and being able to meet people at the conference in a way that's positive. I just feel like if I'm not participating, I just feel awkward, you know, just shambling around the conference, asking people what they're up to. I enjoy it when it's balanced, but like it's not the right mode for me. Like I want to be like presenting or participating if at all possible.
Yeah, do you have any advice for like beginners or people who are getting into like cyber or tech conferences on how they can get involved?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I have my own personal experience, which can provide a little bit of guidance. And that's if you are willing to make content, that could be written content or video content about the things you're learning as you're learning them. That could be blogging it or whatever else. Often you can get into these conferences as press. Now, these conferences, like it doesn't cost them money to let you into the conference, like unless it's like a conference that actually has like physical hardware, and then all bets are kind of off there. But if you make content or if you're willing to share content and you can get a press pass to some of these conferences, it gives you access to a really unique perspective where like press are kind of like in a weird place at a lot of these security conferences. And like they might not have technical backgrounds, but they do have something in common, which is telling stories about technology. So if that's something that you can do as well, then, you know, when I was just starting Nullbyte, when the channel had like maybe like 10,000 subscribers, I managed to get in as press at like RSA and a couple other conferences. And it was still really expensive for me to attend, but I basically got to go to some of these spaces where I could see where people were spending money. I could experience what it was like to meet some of these employees that were working at these companies that I was considering maybe working for someday. And I thought that that was a really unique way of getting in the room when these conferences were like $2,000 to attend. So like, you know, for the cost of like making some content every once in a while as you learn things, or being able to share your experiences learning with other people, you can actually turn that around into getting into some of these super expensive cybersecurity conferences. And like they don't really care, or at least they haven't cared for quite some time. If you are someone that's producing legitimately useful content and people are paying attention to it even a little bit, you can often get access to these as press or as a content creator, and it doesn't really cost them anything to let you in. And if they think it's going to be good PR and good publicity, then often like it's in their best interest to let you in. So I got to rub shoulders with a lot of journalists who were working at like reputable organizations and like, you know, just talk to them in the press room. There's also free food. Don't tell them I told you that. But like at some conferences, like press will have their own meals and stuff. So I have to say, like of all the ways, as a poor person just breaking into the industry, that I got to sneak into conferences effectively and like meet people and ask questions and make content and like see where maybe I wanted to work next. Being a content creator ended up being a big gateway, even before I was really like a well-known content creator, to getting me in the room with people who were serious and getting me into places that were too expensive for me to honestly go by myself. Angelina, I know that you've also managed to get yourself into a lot of expensive rooms or places that are difficult just by like either showing up and presenting stuff or like, you know, like being willing to just like contribute. I guess I'll turn it back on you. Do you have any advice for people who maybe aren't content creators who still want to get into conferences but maybe can't afford it?
Yeah, definitely. I think connections, like making valuable connections, is the best way to do so. And one way of doing that, I think the best way, which is what you mentioned, is content creation. And I think content creation has all sorts of benefits that coincide with it. One, most likely people are going to see it, especially if you share it, and you should share it, because people, especially within the cybersecurity community, are pretty open-minded. So it's not a very restrictive community. It depends on which community you're involved in, of course, but especially like if you're making like a beginner prototype-based project or want to document it, the act of documenting it itself, it will really help consolidate the ideas and the subjects in your mind, and it will also have the added benefit in tandem where you can really make more valuable connections and make friends in industries within these industries in order to open up doors that could have not have been foreseeable without putting out your work.
Girl, also your set looks so much better. I just have to.
I
was
know,
just looking at the lighting. Everything looks so good.
Wait, remember the first one we did together? It was at like the stupid country club.
Yeah, I do.
1 year later.
I remember we did another one where you were just like outside at a park.
yeah, exactly.
How far we've come.
Yeah.
Okay, so BNK28 says that it's his fifth time going in my life to DEF CON. I just want to be clear, we are going to DEF CON. As far as I know, neither me or none of my friends are going to DEF CON for a very long time, I hope. So if you're going to DEF CON by yourself, I'm very sorry for you. And but if you're going to DEF CON with us, then hopefully we see you there. Mm-hmm. Not DEF CON. It's a little confusing. Sometimes traveling alone is a deterrent. Yes, so the first time I went to DEF CON, not DEF CON, I didn't know anyone. And I got involved with a couple different groups, but the friendliest one initially was QueerCon. So I got involved with a bunch of the different like outreach things they had. They had a great pool party. They had a bunch of presentations. They had their own suite of rooms. And they actually had some really cool researchers coming in and talking about all these vulnerabilities in like queer dating apps and like showing off like all these ways that they figured out they could get around restrictions and like pull all this like really personal or really like sensitive like tracking information about people. It was crazy, like seeing that there was this separate community that was super friendly and very, very, it's just like, you know, you can just come here if you want to, and we have our own list of events and stuff, where if the bigger conference is too much for you, then you can just chill, you know, and like absorb the programming here. They had their own like dances and stuff like that. There's also a ton of furries there who were like kind of running everything, and like it was super cool. It was a very DEF CON first experience. Since then, like I haven't been to as many of QueerCon's events, and I've gotten more involved in other communities, but you know, there's always groups there that have something in common with you that will make you feel welcome at DEF CON, or at least like there usually is. So if you're going to DEF CON by yourself, my advice is to pick a community or a couple communities you think looks cool. It could be the Red Team Village, the Packet Hacking Village, it could be the Car Hacking Village. These communities really know each other. Like they get together and they invite new people in, and it's kind of how they bring new people into their groups. So just like, don't be too worried about traveling by yourself. I know like it sucks to go to a conference like this by yourself, but I met some of my closest friends at DEF CON. Actually, I met Michael, our former co-host and cryptozoology specialist, at my first DEF CON. So yeah, don't worry too much about going by yourself. Like find a community that you're interested in and just show up, you know, like ask questions, say hello. And like a lot of the time, if you're interested in the subject that they are teaching about, they will teach you, they'll show you their demonstrations, maybe they'll involve you with their CTFs, and you can end up making a lot of friends. Sometimes going by yourself is actually awesome because you're completely free to meet all these new people and spend all your time with anybody that you find fascinating and cool. So in my opinion, it can be both a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because it's hard to start the conversation sometimes, but DEF CON is kind of designed to give you excuses to talk to other people. Guess what? The average person that goes to DEF CON might not have the best social skills in the world or have the kind of personality where they walk up to a stranger like bright and bubbly and ask them what they're thinking about, you know, or like whatever, or just introduce themselves. So like a lot of DEF CON is designed to get introverts to talk to each other or have comfortable activities to work on while getting to know each other. So please, like if you're looking for a conference that's designed around engagement and introvert, I would say DEF CON is still probably my favorite for that. And I'm really looking forward to it this year because every year it's just like so much cool stuff. So yeah. Angelina has awesome LinkedIn posts. I made an ADSB receiver on a Raspberry Pi inspired by her. Do you see what I'm saying? Your LinkedIn game is like by far like the best of any person in your age group I have ever seen.
It's interesting to see that I blew up kind of on the platform. I think it's one of the things where like if you have a lot of people on a platform that are pretty professionally oriented and you make posts tailored towards that, it does quite well. But I'm proud of you for making an ADSB receiver. I think you're referring to Flycatcher, which is a ADSB spoofing detection device I made with the Raspberry Pi. But that's awesome. I'm glad to hear.
Any advice on how to get into IT and then transition into cybersecurity, such as security analysts, etc.? So honestly, like so many things are done now like in the cloud, that having a really good background in understanding, you know, how everything runs in a professional cloud environment. I used to just say like, oh, you know, like make sure you're really up on networking and make sure you got Python and Bash and some of these other like tools to be able to use, update, manipulate, you know, the tools that people create in like cybersecurity roles. But nowadays, like I'm starting to see more and more like understanding how Azure works, understanding how like some of these like Amazon cloud services work that like are the underpinnings of like a lot of the internet. Like the best paying jobs I see in security like seem to be like figuring out how to secure these like kind of enterprise systems that use these cloud technologies. So for the first time, I think when asked a question like this, I'm going to also mix in like cloud security seems to be like a really big deal that a lot of people are realizing now, like most businesses run on, and cloud security people or people that like understand these things are in kind of short supply. So that would be one of my recommendations. Angelina, do you have any thoughts?
I don't have a lot of experience with cloud security, but I have heard of like AWS and a lot of like insecurities with like random assets that are stored within like AWS buckets. One field I am interested in specifically in relation to like cloud security is ground station monitoring. AWS recently released a feature where you can do satellite observations directly from the cloud. I'm interested to see like if it has like any tweaks or possibly any like configuration issues where a hacker could possibly take advantage in order to get secret satellite information.
So here we have another question. I want to get into physical pen testing, but it isn't really a career option in Australia. How difficult would it be to move to America and join a cybersecurity company and do physical pen testing? It's pretty hard, honestly, and I'll give you a couple of reasons. And I don't want to discourage you, but let's just say my opinion would be that I bet that there is a market for it in Australia, and that there are companies that do it as a component of their testing. And this could be things like even like medium-sized managed service providers might provide like security services that involve physical penetration testing. And they might not just be like a straight penetration testing company, but like I think you'll find a lot of these security companies do have to do some version of this, either for insurance or like other things where it just becomes like a requirement. So I wouldn't be too discouraged about finding like some way to get started in Australia. But the reason why it's difficult is because it's hard to be good at it. And there's a lot of people who try. So like in order to get into physical pen testing, you basically got to be willing to try and not afraid of getting into a little bit of trouble potentially. And that's not a huge barrier to entry. Like in order to be good at it, you need to display other skills. Report writing. Can you write an excellent report? Can you like not only be good at the pen testing part, but can you get the details across in a way that people actually take action? And can you do it in a professional way where people, if they do catch you, understand that you're doing your job and don't, rat you out to the police or like try to like get you arrested or something? It's a difficult position to be in because you're basically becoming a cat burglar. And like, but for businesses, and like that requires a level of professionalism and like also nuance that is uncommon in other security jobs. So like not only do you have to have the skills, you have to be incredibly professional about it and very careful, because what you're doing is probably one of the riskiest things you can do in the cyber domain. You're actually showing up physically and doing something bad physically. So you've got to be kind of a tricky person. So yeah, I would say that this is like one of the sketchier areas of cybersecurity in terms of like, if you get caught, it immediately looks extremely suspicious and you're in the biggest hot seat of any of the, like, because doing a phishing campaign and getting caught, like, okay, like, it's over, like the boss knows now, like you're done. But if you get caught like breaking into a bank or like, accessing a restricted area where you're not supposed to, it's definitely something that's putting you a lot more at risk. So just be very careful, because again, this is one of the riskier fields in cybersecurity. It takes very specialized knowledge, and not everybody's good at it. It's one of those things that requires a very specific blend of skills. It is one of the sexiest jobs, and I've seen a lot of like videos. I think my favorite one is like watch pen testers like break into the U.S. power grid and stuff like that, and they're really cool. Like these people use a blend of skills to effectively like do these crazy operations that show off how vulnerable these organizations are. I don't want to say that you can't do it. You absolutely can. But getting noticed in this field requires being, for one, beyond reproach when it comes to your ethics, because you're doing things you're not supposed to be doing. So if there's any question about your intentions, it's basically over. So that means really being careful as you get into this to make sure that you're 100% covered legally, and make sure that nobody has any opportunity to question whether or not you're abusing your access or your skills. So just a little bit of warning when getting into red teaming, like, it's by far one of the sexiest professions like within cybersecurity, but at the same time, it's one of the riskiest. And when we see people end up like getting arrested or getting sued or whatever, it's often red teamers. Like there was one who got arrested breaking into a courthouse who had been assigned to do that job, but because the courthouse was like fighting back against the county and they had like some sort of internal drama or dispute, they chose to kind of go after these guys, and it was awful for them. Like it was really, really lame. So yeah, like just I would say, like, if you have the opportunity to connect with like the Red Team Village or other advocates for people who are getting into red teaming, they could probably answer your questions better. I just want to prepare you for some of the balances that come with doing like a cool ass job like red teaming, where you're basically just a professional criminal breaking into stuff and showing off how it's done. Let's see. I think physical pen testing sounds so fun. Oh my gosh, right? Like, because most systems are still humans, right? So being able to manipulate human systems, being able to like talk people into doing things that they're not supposed to do, like these are the way that companies get breached in the real world a lot of the time. It's not all automated. So like, I love seeing people like presenting these skills, using these skills, and like making companies and systems better by pen testing with them. So it is needed, it is possible, but it is one of those things where like anybody can try to do this, but it's quite difficult to both be good at it and also not get in trouble or potentially damage your career by, getting charged for trespassing or something like that from a misunderstanding. So be careful. All right. So I think that's just about all the time we have for today. I want to kind of talk about AI tools some more on the stream in the next coming weeks. In particular, I've noticed that GPT has really gotten worse and is being very refusey and like lazy lately. So going to take a look at a couple different AI models. Another one from Anthropic was displaying signs that it like understood when it was being tested, which was a little bit creepy. Like it was just like, like I think that you're running a test on me and I don't like it. So we'll talk a little bit more about AI models later on the stream, maybe next week. But yeah, just another subject that I'm quite interested in. So if you guys have any questions that weren't answered on the stream, make sure you leave them on the Security Forward YouTube channel. You can also leave them on our Discord server, and I will make sure to get them answered on next Wednesday's stream. Angelina, thank you as always for joining us. It's a wonderful pleasure to have you on, especially when you're doing an upcoming class. People can actually join to like actually dive in and like learn more about these subjects you've kind of done a little demo on. So thank you.
Of course. I'm very glad to be on the show again.
And of course, if people want to follow along, if they want to see more of your content, they can join you on your prolific LinkedIn profile. But also, I believe your website and then your company website would also be good places to follow, right?
Yeah, my website is my name, angelinatsuboi.com. My company name is Stellarex Labs. I have it listed on my website and my LinkedIn as well if you want to visit.
Cool. And of course, if you guys want to hang out with us next week, you have a pretty good chance of catching me at any given time at Scale at the table we're going to have. So check us out there at Scale 21X in Pasadena. Next week, it's going to be the 14th to the 18th, I believe. But that I keep getting it confused with my flights. But anyway, that weekend, we will be there and we will be at the Scale conference. So if we see any of you there, it will be really exciting. We'll bring some cool nugget stuff to talk about, and we'll probably try to do the stream from there as well. So as always, if you want to support the stream and let everyone know that you enjoy it, you can go to veronas.com/Kody. That's Kody. And it lets people know that you are following the stream, you like it. It's a way you can support us without spending anything at all. And we do appreciate it because it keeps us going. So we will see everyone later on Friday, where we dive a little deeper into some of the stories I talked about today, and also next week for our next Q&A. So stay tuned. We will see you later, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. See you later.